You know you're the office joke when your wife's colleagues refer to you as Mr. Amanda. I discovered this charming nickname while delivering forgotten files to my wife's corporate headquarters on a Tuesday that would forever divide my life into before and after. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Amanda Martinez had been my wife for 8 years, though lately it felt more like a hostile takeover than a marriage. She worked as a senior executive at Pinnacle Financial, one of those glass tower companies that made money by moving other people's money around. Me? I was Chris Martinez, the guy who fixed their computers when they broke and apparently served as comic relief at company parties. "Chris, honey, you really don't need to come up," Amanda had said when I called about the files. Her voice carried that particular strain I'd grown accustomed to, the sound of someone trying to manage an embarrassing relative. "It's fine, babe. I'm already in the lobby." The elevator ride to the 32nd floor gave me time to admire my reflection in the polished steel doors. At 40, I wasn't winning any fitness contests, but I wasn't exactly falling apart either. My dark hair showed some gray at the temples, and my stomach had developed what Amanda diplomatically called character. I wore my usual uniform of khakis and a polo shirt, comfortable, practical, and apparently the source of endless amusement for Amanda's coworkers. The Pinnacle Financial offices screamed expensive minimalism. Everything was white, chrome and glass, designed to make visitors feel either impressed or intimidated. I felt neither. After years of marriage to Amanda, I'd developed immunity to corporate theater. "Mr. Martinez," the receptionist, a young woman named Kelly, brightened when she saw me. "Amanda's in the conference room. I'll let her know you're here." While waiting, I couldn't help but overhear a conversation from the nearby break room. 3 women were discussing weekend plans, their voices carrying that particular pitch of office gossip. "Did you see Greg's Instagram from the gym? Those abs are ridiculous," one said. "Amanda's so lucky to work closely with him on the Morrison account," another replied. "If I had to spend that much time with Greg Sullivan, I don't know how I'd control myself." "Well, she's got Mr. Amanda at home," the third voice chimed in, followed by laughter. "Poor guy probably thinks a workout involves reaching for the TV remote." More laughter. I stood there, holding Amanda's forgotten files, listening to my marriage become water-cooler entertainment. The smart thing would have been to clear my throat, announce my presence, let them scatter like startled birds. Instead, I filed the information away. Chris Martinez, the guy who fixed computers, had learned something valuable about data. It was only useful when you knew what to do with it. "Chris!" Amanda appeared from around the corner, her smile bright and professional. At 37, she was still stunning. Auburn hair always perfectly styled, clothes that cost more than most people's car payments, and the kind of confidence that came from being very good at making money. She kissed my cheek, a gesture that felt more like a business handshake. "Thank you so much for bringing these. You're a lifesaver." "No problem. I was in the neighborhood anyway. How's the computer business?" The voice belonged to Greg Sullivan, who had materialized beside Amanda like a well-dressed shadow. Greg was everything I wasn't. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of jaw that belonged on movie posters. His handshake was firm enough to crush walnuts. "It's actually software development," I corrected mildly. "I run a tech startup." Greg's smile suggested he found this adorable. Right, the startup thing. That's so cool that Amanda supports your little hobby." My little hobby had generated enough revenue last year to buy Greg's BMW, but I didn't mention that. Amanda's laugh tinkled like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Greg's being modest," Amanda said, her hand briefly touching his arm. "He just closed the Morrison deal, biggest client acquisition in company history." "Congratulations," I said, meaning it. Success was success, even when it belonged to someone who looked at me like I was a participation trophy. "We should celebrate," Greg continued. "There's this new place downtown, Great steaks, better wine list. Amanda, you should bring... He paused, as if trying to remember my name. You should bring Chris, if he's not too busy with his computers. The invitation felt like being asked to attend your own execution, but Amanda was already nodding enthusiastically. That sounds wonderful. Chris loves a good steak, don't you, honey? What I loved was the idea of watching Greg Sullivan try to explain the Morrison deal, while I quietly calculated how much money my little hobby had made during this conversation. But marriage was about compromise, and apparently my compromise was pretending to enjoy dinner with people who thought I was a punchline. Sounds great, I said. Just let me know when. After exchanging pleasantries that felt like diplomatic negotiations, I headed back to the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Amanda and Greg walking back toward the conference room, their heads close together, sharing what looked like a private joke. The ride down gave me 32 floors to think about what I'd heard and seen. Amanda working closely with Greg, the office gossip about his Instagram photos, the way she'd touched his arm, the way he'd dismissed my business as a hobby while she laughed along. 8 years of marriage had taught me to recognize the signs, even when I didn't want to. The late nights at the office, the new workout routine, the way Amanda had started paying more attention to her appearance, buying clothes that were somehow both more expensive and more revealing. The phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. I'd been telling myself it was work stress, the pressure of climbing the corporate ladder. But standing in that elevator, descending from Amanda's world back to mine, I had to face a possibility I'd been avoiding. My wife was having an affair with Greg Sullivan, and half her office knew it. The lobby's marble floors clicked under my shoes as I walked toward the exit. Outside, Chicago's autumn air carried the smell of rain and exhaust. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching people hurry past with the determined urgency of those who had somewhere important to be. I pulled out my phone and called my brother Tom. He answered on the second ring, his voice competing with the sound of power tools in the background. "Chris, what's up, little brother?" Tom was 2 years older and worked construction, building the kinds of buildings Amanda worked in. He had calloused hands, a beer gut, and the most honest laugh I'd ever heard. "Just left Amanda's office. Want to grab a beer?" "It's 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday." "Your point?" Tom laughed. "Murphy's Tavern. 20 minutes. Murphy's was the kind of bar that didn't care about your job title or your clothes. It served beer in bottles and didn't have a wine list. Tom was already there when I arrived, still wearing his work clothes, a hard hat sitting on the bar beside his beer. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," he said as I sat down. The bartender, an older man named Murphy, who actually owned the place, set a beer in front of me without being asked. I'd been coming here long enough to have a usual. "Tell me something, Tom. If you suspected Linda was cheating on you, what would you do?" Tom's expression shifted from casual to serious. "First, I'd make sure I wasn't being paranoid. Then, if I was right, I'd probably do something stupid and end up in jail." He took a long drink. "Why? You think Amanda's stepping out?" I told him about the office gossip, the way she'd acted around Greg, the late nights and secretive phone calls. Tom listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. "Greg Sullivan," he said finally. "Sounds like a real winner. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'm wrong." "Maybe," Tom agreed. "But you're not wrong about being treated like garbage. I heard how that guy talked to you. Little hobby. I would have knocked his perfect teeth out. Violence isn't the answer. Neither is being a doormat." Tom signaled Murphy for another round. "You know what your problem is, Chris. You're too nice. You let people walk all over you because you think it makes you the bigger man. Sometimes being the bigger man just makes you a bigger target." We drank in silence for a while, watching ESPN on the bar's ancient television. Finally, Tom spoke again. "You want my advice? Find out for sure. If she's cheating, then you decide what to do about it. but don't spend the rest of your life wondering. He was right, of course. The not knowing was worse than any truth could be. I finished my beer and headed home to the apartment I shared with Amanda, determined to stop being a passive observer in my own life. The apartment was empty when I arrived, which wasn't unusual. Amanda rarely got home before 7, and it was only 4:30. I stood in our living room looking at the space we'd shared for 3 years. Everything was tasteful, expensive, and somehow sterile. Amanda had chosen all the furniture, all the decorations. My contributions were limited to a bookshelf in the corner and a desk in the spare bedroom where I worked. I walked to Amanda's dresser and stared at it for a long moment. Opening it would be crossing a line, violating her privacy, admitting I didn't trust my own wife. But the alternative was continuing to live in denial, while she and Greg Sullivan turned my marriage into office entertainment. The top drawer contained the usual things: jewelry, scarves, sunglasses. The second drawer was lingerie, most of which I'd never seen her wear. The third drawer held workout clothes, and that's where I found it. A second cell phone, hidden beneath a stack of yoga pants. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was a newer model than the phone Amanda carried openly, and it was password protected. I tried her birthday, our anniversary, her mother's birthday. Nothing worked. Then, on a hunch born of growing cynicism, I tried Greg's name. The phone unlocked. What I found there destroyed any remaining doubt about my wife's fidelity. Months of text messages, photos, and call logs painted a detailed picture of Amanda's relationship with Greg Sullivan. They'd been meeting at hotels, using company trips as cover for romantic getaways, sharing intimate details about their relationship and their disdain for the obstacles in their way, namely me. One conversation from the previous week made my stomach turn. Greg: dinner was awkward last night. Your husband kept staring at me. Amanda: Chris is harmless. He wouldn't know what to do even if he figured it out. Greg: maybe it's time to tell him. I'm tired of sneaking around. Amanda: soon. I need to figure out the financial stuff first. He makes more money than he lets on. Greg: how much more? Amanda: enough that I need a good lawyer before I file for divorce. I sat on the edge of our bed, holding the evidence of my wife's betrayal, and felt something inside me crystallize. Not anger, exactly, though that was certainly part of it. Something colder and more calculating. Amanda thought I was harmless, that I wouldn't know what to do. Greg dismissed my work as a hobby while planning to help my wife take half of everything I'd built. They were both about to learn that underestimating people was a dangerous mistake. I photographed every relevant message, every photo, every call log. Then I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and went to my home office. If Amanda wanted to play games with my life, I was going to make sure I won. The Pinnacle Financial company dinner was scheduled for Friday night, and Amanda had been unusually insistent that I attend. Given what I'd discovered on her secret phone, her motivation was crystal clear. She wanted to parade me around as the clueless husband while she and Greg enjoyed their private joke. "It's really important that you come," she said over breakfast, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when managing difficult clients. "Evelyn will be there, and she's been asking about you." Evelyn Chen was Amanda's mentor, a razor-sharp woman in her 50s who had climbed to the top of Pinnacle Financial by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone around her. She'd taken Amanda under her wing 2 years ago, and Amanda worshipped her like a corporate goddess. "I'm sure Evelyn has better things to discuss than my computer hobby," I said, testing the waters. Amanda's laugh was bright and hollow. "Don't be silly. She thinks it's wonderful that I have such a supportive husband. You know how important appearances are in this business." Appearances. That's what I'd become in my own marriage, a prop in Amanda's professional theater. The devoted husband who stayed home while she conquered the corporate world. The harmless tech guy who posed no threat to anyone's ambitions. "Of course I'll be there," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." The dinner was being held at Skyline, one of Chicago's most expensive restaurants. The kind of place where the menu didn't list prices and the wine cost more than most people's mortgage payments. I arrived wearing my best suit, a charcoal gray number that Amanda had helped me pick out for our last anniversary. Looking at myself in the restaurant's mirror, I had to admit I cleaned up reasonably well. Amanda was already there, holding court at a large table near the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a spectacular view of the city. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my car payment, and her laugh carried across the restaurant like music. Greg stood beside her, one hand resting possessively on the back of her chair. "Chris!" Evelyn Chen rose to greet me, her handshake firm and her smile sharp as a blade. "So wonderful to see you again. Amanda tells me your little business is doing well." Little business. The phrase was becoming a theme. "It has its moments," I replied. The table was a who's who of Pinnacle Financial's power structure. Besides Amanda, Greg, and Evelyn, there were several other executives, their spouses, and a handful of rising stars in the company hierarchy. I was seated between Amanda and a marketing director named Jennifer, while Greg held court from across the table. "Chris runs a tech startup," Amanda announced to the table, her voice carrying the same tone she might use to describe a child's lemonade stand. "He's so dedicated, works from home, keeps his own hours. It's really quite sweet." Sweet. My business that generated 7 figures in annual revenue was sweet. I smiled and nodded, playing the part of the harmless husband while mentally calculating how much money I'd made during the appetizer course. Greg leaned forward, his perfect smile gleaming in the restaurant's ambient lighting. "What kind of tech stuff do you do, Chris? Apps? Websites?" "Software development," I replied. "Mostly enterprise solutions for financial services companies." "That's fascinating," said Jennifer, the marketing director. "Which companies?" I rattled off a list of clients that included 3 of Pinnacle Financial's biggest competitors. The conversation at our end of the table quieted noticeably. "Wait," said another executive, a man named David whose title I couldn't remember. "You developed the portfolio management system for Morrison Financial?" Morrison Financial was the client Greg had supposedly stolen from the competition. "Among other things," I confirmed. Greg's smile faltered slightly. "Small world. Morrison's a great company to work with." "They were," I agreed, "until they got poached by a better offer." The silence that followed was delicious. Amanda's hand found mine under the table, her grip tight enough to cut off circulation. A warning squeeze that said, "Don't embarrass me." Evelyn, ever the diplomat, steered the conversation back to safer waters. "Chris, you must be so proud of Amanda's success. The Morrison acquisition was brilliant." "Absolutely," I said. "Though I have to admit, I'm curious about the details. Morrison's been my client for 3 years. They've always been extremely loyal." "What changed their minds?" Greg shifted in his seat. "Sometimes it's just about finding the right approach, understanding what clients really need." "And what did they need?" "A more personal touch." I nodded thoughtfully. Personal touch, that makes sense. Morrison's CFO, Janet Walsh, always appreciated personal attention. "How is Janet, by the way?" Another silence. Greg's face had gone slightly pale. "Janet's great. Really great." "That's wonderful to hear. I was so sorry when she left Morrison last month. The new CFO, Michael Torres, is nice enough, but he doesn't have Janet's vision." The color drained completely from Greg's face. Amanda's grip on my hand had become painful. Around the table, the other executives were beginning to sense blood in the water. "I think there might be some confusion," Greg said carefully. "Oh, I'm sure there is," I replied. "Confusion happens when people don't do their homework. For instance, someone might think they landed a big client through superior salesmanship, when actually they just happened to be in the right place when that client's primary vendor, me, decided not to renew their contract." The silence was now complete. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed muted. Greg looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Amanda's face had gone white. "You didn't renew with Morrison?" Evelyn asked, her voice sharp with interest. "3-year contracts are standard in my business," I explained. "When Morrison's came up for renewal, I decided to focus on other opportunities. I recommended they work with Pinnacle Financial instead. Seemed like a good fit." David, the executive whose title I couldn't remember, leaned forward. "You recommended us?" "Of course. Amanda's always spoken so highly of the company. I thought it would be nice to throw some business her way." The look Amanda gave me could have frozen Lake Michigan. Greg appeared to be having some kind of internal crisis. Around the table, the other executives were processing the implications of what I'd just revealed. "So the Morrison acquisition," Evelyn began, "was a referral," I finished, though I'm sure Greg's personal touch sealed the deal. What followed was the most uncomfortable dinner of my life, and I was enjoying every minute of it. Greg spent the rest of the evening trying to salvage his reputation, while Amanda alternated between damage control and shooting me looks that promised retribution. The other executives, sensing weakness, began circling like sharks. By the time dessert arrived, Greg's status as the company's golden boy had been thoroughly demolished. He'd gone from conquering hero to beneficiary of charity, and everyone at the table knew it. His attempts to redirect credit to team effort and collaborative success only made things worse. "Well," Evelyn said as the evening wound down, "this has been illuminating. Chris, I had no idea you were so connected in our industry. We should talk more about potential collaborations." "I'd like that," I replied. "I'm always interested in working with talented people." The emphasis on talented wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Greg, who looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Amanda was silent during the drive home, her jaw clenched and her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the city lights blur past, and waited for the explosion. It came as soon as we walked through our apartment door. "What the hell was that?" she demanded, spinning to face me. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking it might be nice to have an honest conversation for once." "Honest?" "You humiliated Greg in front of the entire executive team." "Greg humiliated himself. I just provided context." Amanda's eyes blazed with fury. "You sabotaged him. You made him look like a fool." I told the truth about my own business relationship. If that made Greg look foolish, maybe Greg should have done his homework before taking credit for work he didn't do. It wasn't about the credit. It was about team success. Funny, that's not how he presented it when he was bragging about his conquest. Amanda opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She knew I was right, which only made her angrier. "You don't understand how this business works," she said finally. "Perception matters. Relationships matter. You can't just go around undermining people because you feel insecure." Insecure. The word hung in the air between us like a challenge. Is that what you think this was about? Insecurity? What else could it be? Greg's successful. He's confident. He's everything you're not. So you had to tear him down. Everything I'm not. The words cut deeper than Amanda probably intended, or maybe exactly as deep as she'd meant them to. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing Amanda's face. "You're right," I said quietly. "Greg is confident. Confident enough to steal credit for other people's work. Confident enough to think no one would notice. That kind of confidence is impressive. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Tell me, Amanda, what exactly did Greg do to win the Morrison account?" She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the truth. She didn't know. She'd been so blinded by Greg's charm and her own attraction to him that she'd never questioned his version of events. He developed a comprehensive strategy. He understood their needs. What needs? What strategy? Give me specifics. Another hesitation. I don't have to justify Greg's success to you. No, you don't. But you might want to justify it to Evelyn, and David, and everyone else who was at that table tonight. The fight went out of Amanda like air from a punctured balloon. She sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. You've ruined everything, she whispered. I've revealed everything. There's a difference. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Why would you do this to me? It was a good question, and one I'd been asking myself all evening. Why had I chosen to destroy Greg's reputation so publicly? Why had I humiliated Amanda in front of her colleagues? The answer was simple. Because they'd been humiliating me for months, and I was tired of being the punchline to their private joke. I did it because I'm not as harmless as you think I am, I said. And I'm not as stupid as Greg thinks I am. Amanda's face went pale. What do you mean? I mean, I know about the secret phone, Amanda. I know about the hotels, the late-night meetings, the plans to divorce me after you figure out the financial arrangements. I know everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda stared at me like I'd grown a second head, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Chris, I can explain. No need. Your text messages were very thorough, particularly the ones about how harmless and clueless I am. Tears began streaming down Amanda's face. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The only question now is what we do about it. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup. What do you want? It was a fair question. What did I want? Revenge? Reconciliation? An apology that would somehow undo months of betrayal and humiliation? I want you to understand that actions have consequences, I said. You and Greg thought you could treat me like a joke, plan my life behind my back, and steal credit for my work. Tonight was just the beginning of those consequences. What's that supposed to mean? I looked at my wife, sitting on our expensive couch in our tasteful apartment, and felt nothing but pity. She'd traded 8 years of marriage for a corporate climber who couldn't even be bothered to research his own deals. It means you should probably call Greg, I said. He's going to need all the support he can get. I left Amanda sitting in the living room and went to my home office. There was work to do, and I had a feeling the weekend was going to be very interesting. Saturday morning brought the kind of autumn rain that made Chicago feel like the end of the world. I sat in my home office drinking coffee and watching the water streak down the windows, while Amanda slept off what I assumed was the worst hangover of her professional life. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. with messages from Tom, who'd heard about the dinner through his girlfriend Linda, who worked in Pinnacle Financial's accounting department. The corporate gossip network was faster and more efficient than any news service. Holy shit, Chris, Tom's text read. Linda says you nuked Greg Sullivan from orbit last night. Call me. Instead of calling, I focused on the task at hand. If Amanda and Greg thought last night was embarrassing, they were about to learn the difference between a warning shot and a direct hit. The secret phone had been a goldmine of information, but it was just the beginning. Years of working in tech had taught me that people were remarkably careless with their digital footprints. They used the same passwords for everything, connected all their devices to the same cloud accounts, and assumed that deleting something made it disappear forever. Greg Sullivan's social media presence was a masterclass in narcissistic oversharing. His Instagram account documented every gym session, every expensive dinner, every weekend getaway. Cross-referencing his posts with Amanda's secret phone revealed a pattern of shared experiences that painted a detailed picture of their affair. The hotel in Milwaukee where Amanda had supposedly attended a client conference, Greg had posted photos from the same hotel's bar on the same weekend. The girls' night out that had kept Amanda away until 3 a.m.? Greg's location data showed him at the same downtown restaurant, the emergency weekend work session that had required Amanda to stay at the office overnight. Greg had checked into the Marriott downtown at 11 p.m. that same Friday. But the real treasure was in their email accounts. Amanda had been sloppy about keeping her work and personal lives separate, and Greg was even worse. Their corporate email accounts contained months of flirtatious messages, meeting arrangements, and increasingly explicit discussions about their relationship and their plans for the future. My favorite exchange was from 3 weeks ago. Amanda: Chris is getting suspicious. He asked why I was working so many weekends. Greg: What did you tell him? Amanda: That Evelyn has me on a special project. He doesn't understand business well enough to question it. Greg: Maybe it's time to end this charade. You could do so much better than a computer nerd who works from his pajamas. Amanda: Soon. I need to figure out how much his little business is actually worth. He's more secretive about money than I thought. Greg: How much could it be? He drives a Honda. Amanda: That's what worries me. Either he's broke or he's hiding something. I need to know which before I file papers. Greg: Want me to do some digging? I have connections. Amanda: No. Too risky. I'll handle it my way. Reading their casual discussion of my financial worth while planning to destroy my marriage was illuminating. They saw me as either a broke loser or a potential cash cow, but either way, I was just an obstacle to their happiness. What they didn't know was that my little business had been acquired by a Fortune 500 company 6 months ago for a sum that would have made Greg's BMW look like a toy car. The acquisition had been structured as a long-term consulting contract to minimize tax implications, which meant my income had actually increased while my visible lifestyle remained the same. I'd kept the details from Amanda partly for tax reasons and partly because I'd learned early in our marriage that money changed how people treated you. I'd wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I was worth. Looking at their email exchanges, I realized how naive that had been. By noon, I'd assembled a comprehensive dossier of Amanda and Greg's affair. Photos, messages, location data, hotel receipts charged to company credit cards, and a timeline that showed their relationship had been going on for 8 months. More than enough evidence to destroy both their personal and professional lives. The question was how to use it. Amanda emerged from the bedroom around 1 o'clock, looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup was gone, and she moved with the careful precision of someone nursing a serious headache. "We need to talk," she said, standing in the doorway of my office. "I'm listening." She sat in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where she used to sit when we discussed vacation plans or home improvements. Now she looked like a defendant facing sentencing. "Last night was a disaster," she began. "For Greg, certainly. For all of us. You humiliated him in front of the entire executive team. I corrected a misunderstanding about my business relationship with Morrison Financial. If Greg feels humiliated, maybe he should consider why." Amanda's jaw tightened. "You know exactly what you did." "Yes, I do. The question is, do you know what you've been doing?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Chris, I know you're angry." "I'm not angry, Amanda. I'm disappointed. Angry would imply I still cared enough to feel betrayed. I'm past that." The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd been prepared for rage, for accusations, for demands. She hadn't been prepared for indifference. "I never meant for this to happen," she whispered. "Which part? The affair or getting caught?" "It's not an affair. It's complicated." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. 8 months of hotel meetings and explicit text messages. Very complicated indeed. Her face went white. "You read my messages?" "I read everything. Your secret phone, your emails, Greg's social media posts. You two have been remarkably thorough in documenting your relationship." Amanda stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You had no right." "I had every right. You're my wife. Or were. Until you decided to audition for a replacement." "It's not like that?" "Then explain what it's like." Explain how 8 months of lying to my face is somehow not what I think it is. She started to speak, then stopped. What could she say? The evidence was overwhelming, and we both knew it. I want a divorce, she said finally. I know. You and Greg discussed it extensively, along with your concerns about my financial worth and how to maximize your settlement. The last bit of color drained from her face. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You fell in love with someone else and decided I was an obstacle to your happiness. The only thing you miscalculated was thinking I'd be too stupid or too weak to fight back. Chris, please. Please what? Please pretend I don't know about the hotels? Please ignore the fact that you've been planning to leave me while pretending to love me? Please continue being the harmless computer nerd who doesn't understand how the real world works? Each word was a hammer blow, and Amanda flinched with every impact. She'd expected anger, but my calm recitation of facts was somehow worse than any shouting match. What do you want? She asked again. It was becoming her favorite question, as if there was some negotiation to be had, some deal that could make this all go away. I want you to understand that underestimating people has consequences, I said. You and Greg thought I was harmless. Last night was just the beginning of discovering how wrong you were. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. Speaking of Greg, you might want to call him. He's about to have a very interesting Monday morning. Amanda's eyes widened. What did you do? Nothing illegal, nothing unethical. I simply made sure that certain information reached the appropriate people. What information? What people? I turned my computer screen toward her. On it was an email I'd sent to Evelyn Chen an hour ago, with copies to several other Pinnacle Financial executives. The subject line read, "Concerns regarding corporate credit card usage and client confidentiality." Amanda read the first few lines and her face went ashen. The email detailed Greg's use of company credit cards for personal expenses, including hotel rooms that coincided with Amanda's business trips. It also raised questions about potential conflicts of interest and the sharing of confidential client information outside official channels. You can't send this, Amanda whispered. I already did. About an hour ago. They'll fire him. Probably. Corporate ethics violations tend to have that effect. They'll fire me too. That depends on how much you knew about his activities. According to your text messages, you were an active participant in his misuse of company resources. Amanda sank back into her chair, her face in her hands. You've destroyed us both. No, Amanda. You destroyed yourselves. I just documented it. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. 8 years of marriage, and this is how you want it to end? With revenge? This isn't revenge. Revenge would be emotional, irrational, designed to cause pain for its own sake. This is consequences. You made choices, and now you get to live with the results. What about what we had? What about love? I looked at my wife crying in my office chair and felt nothing but pity. What we had ended the first time you lied to my face about working late. Love doesn't survive that kind of betrayal. She wiped her eyes, smearing what was left of yesterday's makeup. So what happens now? Now you call a lawyer, a good one. You're going to need it. For the divorce? For the divorce, for the employment issues, for whatever else comes out of this mess. You and Greg made a lot of mistakes, Amanda. I suspect we've only scratched the surface. She stood up slowly, like an old woman. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. Every day for 8 months you hurt me. The only difference is that now you have to acknowledge it. Amanda walked to the door, then turned back. I did love you, Chris, at the beginning. I know, I said. That's what makes this so sad. After she left, I sat in my office listening to the rain and thinking about the strange turns life could take. Yesterday morning, I'd been the harmless computer nerd married to a successful executive. Today, I was a man with enough evidence to destroy 2 careers and a marriage that existed only on paper. My phone rang. Tom's name appeared on the screen. Jesus Christ, Chris, he said without preamble. Linda says Pinnacle's executive team is in full crisis mode. What the hell did you do? I sent some emails. Some emails? The entire company is buzzing about corporate investigations and ethics violations. Greg Sullivan is apparently having a complete meltdown. Interesting. Chris, you just nuked 2 careers from orbit. How are you so calm about this? It was a good question. How was I so calm? Yesterday, discovering Amanda's affair had felt like the end of the world. Today, watching it all unravel felt like justice. Because I'm tired of being treated like a joke, I said. Amanda and Greg thought they could plan my life behind my back, steal credit for my work, and treat me like an obstacle to their happiness. They were wrong. And you're not done yet, are you? Not even close. Tom was quiet for a moment. Be careful, little brother. Revenge has a way of consuming people. This isn't revenge, Tom. It's education. Some people need to learn that actions have consequences. And if Amanda gets hurt in the process? I looked at the rain streaking down my office window and thought about 8 months of lies, betrayal, and humiliation. Amanda hurt herself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. After hanging up with Tom, I returned to my computer. There was still work to do, and Monday morning was going to be very interesting for a lot of people. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Chicago feel alive with possibility. I sat in my home office, drinking coffee and monitoring the digital earthquake I'd triggered at Pinnacle Financial. The corporate email system was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Thanks to some carefully placed contacts and a few strategic information requests, I had a front-row seat to the chaos unfolding on the 32nd floor of Amanda's office building. Evelyn Chen had called an emergency executive meeting for 8 a.m. Greg Sullivan had been summoned to HR at 9. Amanda's calendar showed a meeting with the company's legal department at 10:30. The dominoes were falling exactly as I'd anticipated. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Please call me. We need to talk before this gets worse. Before it got worse. As if we were still in the early stages of this unraveling. I deleted the message without responding. At 9:15, my landline rang. The caller ID showed Pinnacle Financial's main number. Chris Martinez speaking. Mr. Martinez, this is Evelyn Chen from Pinnacle Financial. I believe you know my colleague Amanda Martinez. My wife, yes. How can I help you, Miss Chen? I was hoping we could arrange a meeting to discuss some concerns that have been brought to my attention. Would you be available this afternoon? Of course. What time works for you? 2 o'clock? Our offices? I'll be there. After hanging up, I allowed myself a small smile. Evelyn Chen was nobody's fool. She'd connected the dots between my revelation about the Morrison account, the evidence I'd provided about corporate credit card abuse, and Amanda's increasingly obvious relationship with Greg Sullivan. Now she wanted to understand exactly what kind of problem she was dealing with. I spent the morning preparing for the meeting, not just gathering documents and evidence, but thinking through strategy. Evelyn Chen was a predator in an expensive suit, someone who'd climbed to the top of a cutthroat industry by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone around her. She wouldn't be impressed by emotion or moral outrage. She'd want facts, implications, and solutions. At 1:30, I put on my best suit and drove downtown. The Pinnacle Financial building looked the same as always, glass and steel reaching toward the sky, a monument to corporate ambition. But today, I wasn't the harmless husband delivering forgotten files. Today, I was a man with enough information to reshape the company's executive structure. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt different this time. Instead of feeling intimidated by the corporate grandeur, I found myself analyzing it with a businessman's eye. The expensive marble, the designer furniture, the original artwork, all of it paid for by the kind of financial manipulation that companies like mine made possible. Kelly, the receptionist, looked nervous when she saw me. Mr. Martinez, Ms. Chen is expecting you. Conference room B. Conference Room B was smaller than the main boardroom, but still impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Lake Michigan, and the conference table could seat 12 people comfortably. Evelyn Chen sat at the head of the table, a stack of documents in front of her and a legal pad covered with notes. "Chris, thank you for coming on such short notice." She gestured to the chair beside her. "I hope you don't mind, but I've asked our legal counsel to join us." A man in his 50s entered the room, carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of conservative suit that screamed corporate attorney. He introduced himself as Robert Hayes, Pinnacle's general counsel. "Mr. Martinez," Evelyn began, "I'll be direct. The information you provided has raised serious concerns about potential ethics violations and misuse of company resources. Before we proceed with any internal investigation, I need to understand the scope of what we're dealing with." I opened my briefcase and removed a thick folder. "I appreciate your directness, Ms. Chen. I think you'll find this comprehensive." What followed was the most surreal business meeting of my life. For 2 hours, I walked Evelyn Chen and Robert Hayes through 8 months of documented evidence showing how Greg Sullivan and my wife had used company resources to conduct their affair. Hotel rooms charged to corporate credit cards, client dinners that were actually romantic dates, business trips that coincided with personal getaways. But the real bombshell was the email evidence showing that Greg had been sharing confidential client information with Amanda, who had no official involvement in his accounts. Worse, some of that information had been used to poach clients from other firms, creating potential legal liability for Pinnacle Financial. "This is extensive," Robert Hayes said, flipping through the documents. "How did you obtain all of this?" "Greg Sullivan is remarkably careless with his digital security," I replied. "Most of this information is publicly available through social media posts and corporate email systems. The rest came from my wife's personal communications, which I had legal access to as her spouse." Evelyn Chen had remained silent through most of the presentation, her face giving away nothing. Finally, she spoke. "What do you want, Chris?" It was the same question Amanda had been asking, but coming from Evelyn, it carried different implications. She wasn't asking about emotional satisfaction or personal revenge. She was asking about business terms. "I want Greg Sullivan fired for cause, with no severance package and no positive references. I want Amanda transferred out of any position where she might have access to confidential client information. And I want a formal acknowledgement from Pinnacle Financial that the Morrison account was acquired through my referral, not Greg's sales efforts." "That's all?" "That's all." Evelyn exchanged a look with Robert Hayes. "Given the evidence you've provided, those terms seem reasonable. What assurance do we have that this matter won't become public?" "You have my word that I have no interest in embarrassing Pinnacle Financial or damaging the company's reputation. My issues are with specific individuals, not the organization." "And if we can't reach an agreement?" I smiled. "Then I suppose this information might find its way to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Chicago Tribune's business section, and several of your biggest competitors. Corporate ethics violations make for interesting reading." The threat was delivered with the same calm tone I might use to discuss the weather, but its implications hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn Chen was many things, but she wasn't stupid. She understood exactly what kind of public relations nightmare she was facing. "I think we can work something out," she said finally. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises to have formal agreements drawn up by the end of the week. As I rode the elevator back to the lobby, I felt a satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Linda says Greg Sullivan just got escorted out of the building by security. What did you do?" I was typing a response when the elevator doors opened and I found myself face to face with Greg Sullivan himself. He looked like a man who'd been hit by a truck. His perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone whose world had just collapsed. "You," he said, his voice thick with rage. "You did this. I documented what you did, I replied calmly. There's a difference. You destroyed my career over your pathetic jealousy. I exposed your ethics violations and misuse of company resources. If that destroyed your career, maybe you should have made better choices. Greg stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. You think you're so smart, don't you? The clever little computer nerd who outmaneuvered everyone. I think I'm someone who got tired of being treated like a joke. Amanda never loved you. She told me you were boring, that you had no ambition, that being married to you was like being married to a piece of furniture. The words were designed to hurt, and they did. But I'd moved past the point where Greg Sullivan's opinion of me mattered. And yet she stayed married to me for 8 years while you were just a side project, I replied. What does that say about you? Greg's face went red. For a moment, I thought he might actually swing at me. Instead, he stepped back, his voice dropping to a whisper. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You're unemployed, unemployable in this industry, and facing potential legal action for corporate ethics violations. It's very much over. The elevator doors opened again, and Greg stalked out without another word. I watched him go, feeling nothing but pity for a man who'd destroyed his own life through arrogance and poor judgment. That evening, Amanda came home to find me packing boxes in the living room. She stood in the doorway, still wearing her work clothes, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. Evelyn told me about your meeting, she said. I figured she would. They're transferring me to the Detroit office. It's a demotion, but at least I still have a job. Congratulations. She watched me wrap our wedding photos in newspaper, each one a memory of a life that no longer existed. I'm sorry, Chris. I know that doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I looked up at her, this woman I'd loved for 8 years, and felt nothing but sadness for what we'd lost. I know you are, but sorry doesn't undo 8 months of lies and betrayal. Sorry doesn't give me back the marriage I thought I had. What happens now? Now you move to Detroit and start over. I stay here and do the same. And us? I taped up a box of books and set it aside. There is no us, Amanda. There hasn't been for months. We just finally stopped pretending. She started to cry then, quiet tears that spoke of genuine regret and lost possibilities. I felt bad for her, but not bad enough to forgive her. I never meant for it to happen this way, she whispered. I know, but it did happen, and now we both have to live with the consequences. Amanda went to our bedroom, her bedroom now, and I continued packing. By midnight, I'd boxed up 8 years of shared life and reduced it to a stack of cardboard containers. Tomorrow, I'd move into the downtown condo I'd rented that afternoon. Tomorrow, I'd start the next chapter of my life. But tonight, I sat in my empty living room and thought about the strange journey that had brought me here. A week ago, I'd been the harmless computer nerd married to a successful executive. Tonight, I was a man who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge was simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Beer tomorrow? I want to hear the whole story. Absolutely, I typed back. I've got some stories to tell. Outside, Chicago glittered in the darkness, full of possibilities and new beginnings. I was 40 years old, newly single, and wealthier than most people imagined. For the first time in months, the future felt full of potential. Amanda and Greg had thought I was harmless, that I wouldn't know what to do when I discovered their betrayal. They'd been wrong about that, just as they'd been wrong about so many other things. Sometimes the quiet ones were the most dangerous of all. 6 months later, I stood in my new downtown condo, looking out at Lake Michigan and marveling at how much my life had changed. The divorce had been finalized the previous month, with Amanda getting far less than she'd hoped for and far more than she deserved. Greg Sullivan had disappeared from Chicago entirely, reportedly working at a small firm in Phoenix for a fraction of his former salary. The doorbell interrupted my morning coffee ritual. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, I found Evelyn Chen standing in my hallway, impeccably dressed as always and carrying a leather portfolio. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," she said. "I was in the neighborhood and thought we might discuss a business proposition." "Of course. Come in." I led her to the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the lake. Evelyn accepted my offer of coffee and settled into one of the leather chairs I'd bought to furnish my new life. "Impressive place," she said, looking around at the modern furniture and expensive artwork. "The divorce settlement must have been generous." "The divorce settlement was fair. The impressive place comes from my actual business success, not Amanda's assumptions about it." Evelyn smiled. "Which brings me to why I'm here. Pinnacle Financial is looking to expand our technology consulting services. Given your expertise and your intimate knowledge of our industry, I thought you might be interested in a partnership." "What kind of partnership?" She opened her portfolio and removed a contract. "Exclusive consulting agreement. 5 years, guaranteed minimum revenue, with performance bonuses that could double your annual income." I scanned the document, noting the figures and terms. It was a generous offer, more than generous. It was also a way for Evelyn to keep me close, to make sure I remained a friend rather than a potential enemy. "This is very flattering," I said, "but I'm curious about the timing. Why now?" "Because you've proven that you understand how this business really works. Not the corporate theater that most people see, but the actual relationships and power dynamics that drive everything. That's a rare and valuable skill. And it has nothing to do with making sure I don't share any more uncomfortable truths about Pinnacle Financial." Evelyn's smile was sharp as a blade. "Chris, I've always appreciated directness. Yes, keeping you as an ally rather than a potential adversary is part of the calculation. But that doesn't make the opportunity any less real or profitable for both of us." I set the contract aside. "I'll need to review this with my attorney." "Of course. Take all the time you need." After Evelyn left, I called Tom to tell him about the offer. He listened without interrupting, then laughed. "6 months ago, you were the office joke. Now you're getting courted by the same people who used to mock you. How does it feel?" "Surreal," I admitted, "but also satisfying. Amanda always said I didn't understand how business worked. Turns out I understood it better than she did." Speaking of Amanda, Linda heard she's engaged to some guy in Detroit, some middle manager at her new company. The news should have hurt, but instead I felt nothing but mild curiosity. Amanda's life after our marriage was no longer my concern. "Good for her," I said. "I hope she's learned something from the experience." "And Greg?" "Still in Phoenix, as far as I know. Still paying the price for thinking he was smarter than everyone else." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Do you ever regret how it all went down? The public humiliation, the destroyed careers?" It was a question I'd been asking myself for months. Had I gone too far? Had my response been proportional to their betrayal? "No," I said finally. "They made choices, and those choices had consequences. I didn't destroy their careers. They did that themselves through their actions. I just made sure those actions came to light." "Fair enough. So what's next for the notorious Chris Martinez?" "I'm thinking about accepting Evelyn's offer. It would mean working with some of the same people who used to treat me like a joke, but the money's too good to pass up." "And the irony of it doesn't bother you?" "The irony is the best part. Amanda spent 8 years telling me I didn't understand the corporate world. Now that same world is paying me millions to navigate it for them." After hanging up with Tom, I walked back to the windows and looked out at the lake. A year ago, I'd been a man who let his wife's colleagues call him Mr. Amanda without fighting back. I'd accepted their dismissive comments about my little hobby and their assumptions about my worth. That man was gone, replaced by someone who understood that respect wasn't given. It was taken. Someone who knew that the quiet ones were often the most dangerous, because they had time to think, to plan, to strike when their enemies least expected it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your success. Some of us always knew you were more than you appeared to be. Jada." Amanda's former friend who'd been the source of some of my most valuable intelligence. She'd reached out a few times since the divorce, always careful to maintain plausible deniability about her role in exposing the affair. I deleted the message without responding. That chapter of my life was closed, and I had no interest in reopening it. The next morning, I called my attorney and told him to accept Evelyn's offer with a few modifications. If Pinnacle Financial wanted to pay me millions to be their technology consultant, I was happy to oblige. If they thought that would buy my silence about their internal politics, they were welcome to find out how wrong they could be. The signing ceremony was held in Pinnacle's main conference room, the same room where Amanda used to attend executive meetings. Evelyn was there, along with several other executives I recognized from the disastrous company dinner that had started this whole chain of events. "Welcome to the Pinnacle family," Evelyn said as we shook hands after signing the contracts. "Thank you. I look forward to a long and profitable relationship." As I left the building, I passed the lobby where I'd once overheard Amanda's colleagues mocking me as Mr. Amanda. The same people who'd dismissed my work as a hobby were now paying me more money than most of them would see in a lifetime. The transformation was complete. I'd gone from punchline to power player, from joke to threat, from harmless husband to dangerous adversary. And I'd done it all without breaking a single law or crossing any ethical lines that my enemies hadn't crossed first. That evening, I sat in my condo with a glass of expensive wine, looking out at the city lights and thinking about the strange turns life could take. Amanda and Greg had thought they could treat me like a fool, plan my destruction behind my back, and steal credit for my achievements. They'd learned too late that underestimating people was a dangerous game. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Amanda's number, which surprised me. We hadn't spoken since the divorce was finalized. "Hello, Amanda. Chris? I hope it's okay that I called. I heard about your contract with Pinnacle. News travels fast. I wanted to congratulate you, and to apologize again for everything that happened." Her voice sounded different, smaller somehow. The confidence and arrogance that had once defined her were gone, replaced by something that might have been humility. "Thank you. How are things in Detroit?" "Good. Different, but good. I'm engaged, actually, to a nice man named Robert. He's nothing like—" She paused. "He's nothing like Greg. I'm happy for you." "Are you? Really?" I thought about it for a moment. Was I happy that Amanda had found someone new? Or was I just indifferent to her life after our marriage? "Yes," I said, and meant it. "I hope you've learned something from what happened." "I have. I learned that actions have consequences, and that some mistakes can't be undone." She was quiet for a moment. "I also learned that I never really knew you at all." "No, you didn't. But then again, you never really tried to." "I know. That's one of my biggest regrets." We talked for a few more minutes about inconsequential things, the weather in Detroit, her new job, my new condo. It was the kind of polite conversation that former spouses have when they're trying to prove they've moved past their anger. "Chris," she said, as we were about to hang up, "I know this doesn't change anything, but I want you to know that I did love you. At the beginning, and even at the end, in my own confused way. I know you did. That's what made your betrayal so devastating. I'm sorry. I'll always be sorry. I know. But sorry doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't undo the consequences. We both have to live with the choices we made." After hanging up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, thinking about forgiveness and moving on. I didn't hate Amanda anymore. That kind of anger was exhausting and ultimately pointless. But I didn't forgive her either. Some betrayals were too deep, some lies too extensive, some humiliations too public to simply forget. What I felt was something closer to pity. Amanda had traded 8 years of marriage and a comfortable life for a few months of excitement with a man who'd proven to be as shallow and selfish as she was. She'd gotten what she wanted, but the price had been higher than she'd expected. Greg Sullivan had paid an even steeper price. His career in Chicago was over, his reputation destroyed, his marriage ended. He'd thought he was so clever, stealing credit for my work and mocking my marriage. Now he was working for a fraction of his former salary in a city where no one knew his name. They'd both learned that actions have consequences, that treating people like jokes can backfire spectacularly, and that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous of all. As for me, I'd learned that respect wasn't something you could ask for or expect. You had to take it, sometimes forcefully, and you had to be prepared to defend it when challenged. I'd learned that being underestimated was actually an advantage, because it meant your enemies would never see you coming. Most importantly, I'd learned that revenge didn't have to be violent or illegal to be devastating. Sometimes the most effective revenge was simply making sure that people faced the full consequences of their own actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Drinks tomorrow to celebrate your new contract?" "Absolutely," I replied. "I've got some new stories to tell." Outside my windows, Chicago glittered in the darkness, full of possibilities and new beginnings. I was 41 years old, wealthier than I'd ever imagined, and finally understood exactly what kind of man I was. Amanda and Greg had thought I was harmless. They'd been wrong about that, just as they'd been wrong about so many other things. Sometimes the biggest mistake you can make is underestimating the quiet ones.